All right, guys, we have a real special video today. We are here at Tuning by Nick, and we're going to get the Civic all tuned up. All right, so after a long hibernation throughout the winter, the Civic is finally on the road, or in this case, on a dyno. I've done a lot of stuff over the winter, and basically it's to improve the overall power of the car, the drivability on track, and just to get a little bit more torque out of it. This car is already pretty well known for being very torquey. This engine, the K24Z7, is the highest torque output for a K24 that's not direct injected. And I just wanted to play off that characteristic and that strength that the engine already has. So we're going to talk with Nick, see what his thoughts are about the whole power train and the power band that we were able to make, and also see what it sounds like now with the new cams, because I'm sure it's a pretty different tone.
All right, she is sounding aggressive. That was a first pull that we did just to make sure everything's on point. Car's running properly. There's no weird bugs going on in the software. Did make 208 horsepower and 187 foot-pounds of torque, but not cleanly. So Nick's gonna work on cleaning that up for us. Make sure the car runs very smooth and reliably throughout the season. But I want to talk about what we have done to the car over the winter, because I know we haven't really touched on that. All right, so we'll actually start off with the clutch and flywheel package. For this, we went to ACT. So we have their sport pressure plate with a 6-puck sprung race disc, and that's mated to a lightweight aluminum flywheel. On from there, we have Unit 2 that we got a baffled oil pan from. It's a new product for the 9th gen SI, so I was really excited to be able to get that. No concern about oil starvation going around these corners now. That is paired with their ported Type S oil pump, so more stable oil pressures, and the combination of those will kind of let us rev out the engine a little bit more freely. For the timing set, we went to Toda, and we have the Toda timing chain and tensioner as their heavy duty series. So these are been tested pretty rigorously throughout years, and pretty well known to last a very long time. So I'm really happy to not have to worry about timing chain failures or anything like that. Also, for the timing chain assembly, we went with the 4-piston Extreme Racing timing guides. These are known pretty well in the drag racing community as being the go-to guides to have for your timing chain. They are one-piece construction made out of this space age material, and 4 Pistons backs them for several years. And yeah, they even said that the material that it's made out of is also used in the medical industry for critical bones. So whatever it is super durable, super strong. I don't want to have to be opening this engine up again because of a guide failure, so I figured I'd do this one and done, and kind of gives me ease to not have to think about the timing set on this car. Continuing on with the theme of 4-piston racing, for the top end of the engine, we have a set of their brand new drop-in camshafts. Their Stage 1 camshafts are designed specifically for the engine, and they the numbers that they've provided are pretty good. Looking at like a 10 to 15 wheel horsepower bump on my setup. Reason why it's going to be something like that is because I'm sticking with the stock intake manifold. Reason being for that is that I still do autocross and daily the car, and I like the low end torque. So it'd be interesting to see what the results actually come out as. But I'm expecting the power and torque to be a little bit on the lower end of their advertised numbers, but pretty much throughout the whole power band. Outside of that, that's basically everything that we've done to the car. So far, we're at 208 wheel horsepower, 187 foot-pounds of torque. But like I said, it wasn't the greatest air-fuel ratios throughout the whole tune, and a bit of knock. So Nick's going to work hard on that to get that all cleaned up. And yeah, so that's basically it. Here's a list of some of the stuff that's already existing on the car from last season. And we're going to do a couple pulls to see how the car sounds. So while Nick is deep in the ones and the zeros trying to tune up the car, I decided to go for a little walk and explore, and I am glad I did.
Okay, so after a few hours of tuning, Nick worked all his magic on the engine. Super diligent, so I really appreciate that. And we have a chart, and those numbers are just numbers to me, but Nick can evaluate it a lot better than I can. So Nick, what do you think of the numbers that we made today?
I think they're right where they should be. These are drop-in cams. They're supposed to give you a little bit more power over the stock cams without like going crazy and having to do valve trains. So basically they've just emphasized or made a little bit more power everywhere in the power band. So I think they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. So
yeah, well, that's perfect. That was the idea. Like I said before, didn't want to swap intake manifolds to kind of have a trade-off for power. This allows me to retain the characteristics of the engine, but just up it a little bit. So really cool to see that making almost 190 foot-pounds of torque, which is more than many people would say with these intake manifolds that I would make. 214 horsepower, I'm happy with that. I'm sure it's going to feel very different in the car. Track impressions will be coming soon, so we'll know for sure. How does this kind of stack up, do you think, against other cars you've tuned? I know you've done hundreds
I've done
of these.
literally hundreds of ninth gens, and they're an interesting engine. They make a lot of mid-range power, but they don't make a lot of peak horsepower. So in this case, at 214 wheel horsepower, it is basically making what most full bolt-ons make with an RBC intake manifold, but you're making significantly more torque everywhere.
Perfect.
So it is kind of a really good combination of parts.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so we don't have the torque dip and all the other stuff that kind of come along with just throwing an RVC on one of these engines. So Honda did kind of know what they were designing when they did this, but obviously it still has its limitations, right? If I wanted to go for more horsepower and more torque, intake manifolds probably the next step, you would think, right?
I think so. Like, if you wanted more peak horsepower, for sure. Like most things in life, it's always a trade-off. So if you want some more peak horsepower, you're probably gonna lose a whole bunch of mid-range power. Basically, you have to decide what's gonna work best for your application, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like if you have a stock engine, you put 30 pounds of boost to it, it's probably going to be a little leggy, right? But it will have a ton of top end power. But you have to decide. For me, I'm still doing a little bit of autocross this year, so torque was very key, and obviously doing more track, more OTA, having that extra top end power without really changing the characteristics of the power band. So it's not really something I really have to relearn. It's just going to feel quicker everywhere, which is definitely a positive for me. Yeah, so like I said, Nick has tuned hundreds of these. So I'm sure if you're willing to, you can pull up a couple of examples of what he already has, and we can do a little comparison to see where the power is and isn't.
Yeah, definitely. I can bring up probably a graph that's very similar to this with similar mods, but without the cams. So why don't I do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So up on the screen, in red is your results, and in blue, another 9th gen Civic Si that I tuned that had almost the exact same parts, but without your cams.
Awesome. Okay. So by the looks of it, it actually looks like it's a mirror image of mine, just a little bit less.
Yeah.
Basically everywhere. It does look like in the 45 to 55 thousand or 100 RPM range. There is a little bit more of a discrepancy, but it kind of picks up that later.
Yeah, basically more power just everywhere. Just the difference is those cams. They're just slightly more aggressive than stock, so you get that power. And I think Ford Piston says they shift the power band a little bit further, and it kind of looks like they have. You can kind of see where you're making a little bit more power mid-range and carrying a little bit further. So we are revving your car out further because it does have the oil pump.
Yes.
This car did not have an oil pump, so we kept it at about 7,500 RPM, but very close results, and I think it does a great job of emphasizing the difference in the cams.
Perfect. Okay, so if we were to look at this compared to what we have now, this is kind of a good comparison of what I was dealing with last year compared to what I'm dealing with this year. So mind you, Nick did not tune my car last year, so I actually probably was leaving a little bit of power on the table as well. So we'll call it this a 10, maybe a 10 to 15 wheel horsepower difference, and maybe a almost 15 to 20 foot-pound of torque difference too that we picked up with these cams. So not bad at all. I'm really, really happy with that. What would you say this is compared to, like, do you have anything related to like more like a stock version of this car?
Sure, I'm sure I have a few dynographs of stock 9th gens that I can find.
Cool, sounds good.
All right, so now up on the screen we have your results in red, the same results from the other car that had basically the same bolt-on parts but no cams in blue, and then a completely stock tuned 9th Gen SI, so all stock parts on it but tuned with a Flash Pro.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, you can kind of see like the curve doesn't really change.
No,
that
it's
much.
very similar.
Yeah, it doesn't really change that much. You can even see in that mid-range area, the stock car was making almost the same as the one with all the bolt-ons that you had there. So we can see there's just incremental changes that we're making in the car. Basically every year we're adding 10 horsepower, 10 torque to it, basically, it seems like. So that's awesome. So that's a kind of good progression if you want to look at how this car's progressed over the years. That shows you what it was when I had my stock intake on it, compared to the blue being last year, really what we had to deal with last year, and red's what we're going into this year. The biggest difference is that area. All right, so we have chewed up enough of Nick's very valuable time today. Nick, thank you very much. I can track with confidence knowing that the car's not going to knock itself to death. So, and knowing that I have the extra power to work with, we'll see what that translates into. But if you guys haven't checked out Nick's YouTube, he does a ton of videos where he goes and does a lot of details onto his dynos, tunes, even gives some insider information on how to help you tune your own car too, which I think the community loves you for that, so really appreciate that. He also has a Porsche with this engine in it, which is insane. Definitely check it out. I'll leave a link to his channel below, okay? Until the next one, take care, guys.